Thank you, Mr. Zatko, for your very informative testimony this morning. I want to start with some questions about Twitter's censorship policies. I know you weren't at Twitter for most of 2020, but I want to start with an example from June of 2020, specifically me. As left-wing street militias were rioting and looting in our streets, I posted on the website that the National Guard and even the active duty military have been used to stop such rioting in the past, most recently in 1992 in the LA riots. Within a couple hours, a low-level employee at Twitter's Washington office contacted my staff and said that if I did not delete that tweet, that my account would be permanently locked. My staff worked with this low-level employee, calling her on several occasions because she seemed very reluctant to put anything in writing in an email. They documented the accuracy of my comment and gave examples of how other elected officials had used similar language. The 30-minute window passed. My account was not locked. Ultimately, she said that Twitter would not take any action about my account. As I said, I know it was before you began at Twitter, but from your experience, would a low-level Twitter employee typically have the authority to permanently lock the account of an elected member of Congress?
From my experience, they should not have the authorization to do it, although it would probably be a low-level employee that would be instructed to do it.
So she was likely taking direction from more senior officials at the company.
Not knowing the situation, I can't comment on the specific one, but that is the sort of activity that I would see there. And I can concur that I did notice a reluctance to put a lot of things in writing on particular topics.
I noticed that in the emails that Mr. Agarwal sent to you, he seemed very reluctant to put things in writing or made statements about what he was going to verbally express to the board. And he apparently did not express those things. Sticking with the censorship, again, like I said, I know you weren't there in the lead up to the 2020 election, but once you arrived just a couple days after the election, you selected an outside company to do an evaluation of Twitter's censorship policies. The report that you commissioned found that Twitter's content controls are ad hoc and informal. Those are two direct quotes. And the policy decisions behind it are made mostly by a small group of Twitter staff at San Francisco, quote, frequently during a time of crisis. Is that accurate?
I didn't hire them to do a report on censorship, but that was the platform manipulation organization. And yes, the cite, how you cite the report as what they found on
and what
that team is correct.
When it says frequently in a time of crisis, what kind of crisis was the report referring to?
I believe the report also said, and this is from what I experienced, if something was brought up in the media, if a government brought it up, if somehow it became publicly aware, or if there was, an ongoing outage to the system or some active disruption or crisis.
Yeah, thank you for that, because the report does go on to say that according to Twitter employees interviewed, Twitter usually censors information, quote, only if it is flagged by reporters or news headlines, partners, which it means to include academic organizations and other social media companies or political officials, end quote. So does Twitter have special channels of communication with fellow social media companies like Facebook to discuss so-called misinformation?
If they do, I believe that they would be ad hoc. I am not aware of official ones that would not have been within my organizations.
Okay, what about other so-called partners like pharmaceutical companies or advocacy groups?
I am not aware of those. Again, that would be out of council or other organizations.
So saying ad hoc, you think in these cases, just say a executive at a pharmaceutical company that doesn't like what's being posted on the website, or a left-wing activist at a Washington think tank would just use pre-existing relationships to contact someone at Twitter on an ad hoc basis?
I do not know.
Well, how can they coordinate if they don't have some kind of channel of communication set up?
In the report that was an attachment from the organization, they talked about disinformation operations, which I do believe, my understanding was that the site integrity team spoke with other organizations and with other social media companies about ongoing disinformation or platform manipulation. I do not know anything beyond what was in the report for that topic.
You said something earlier I just want to come back to. This isn't an exact quote, but I want to give you a chance to elaborate a little bit. It was something along the lines of, if you don't have a foreign intelligence officer inside Twitter, you probably aren't doing a very good job as an intelligence agency. Is that close enough?
Yeah, that's close enough, sir. I worked for the government. I held a high-level position. I worked running research and development and programs for the Department of Defense and intelligence communities. And from my interactions with these people and these organizations, Twitter would be a gold mine. From my understanding, from people in the community who focus on foreign intelligence organizations and assets, if you placed somebody in Twitter, as I believe that, as we know has happened, it would be very difficult to Twitter to find them. They would probably be able to stay there for a long period of time and gain a significant amount of information to provide back on either targeting people or on information as to Twitter's decisions and discussions and to the direction of the company.
And does that include in Twitter's U.S. offices versus overseas, or is that distinction immaterial given the way Twitter functions?
I believe that's immaterial in both.
Thank you.
My pleasure, sir.
Mr. Zatka, I just wanted to follow up a little bit on the repeated suggestions that you've made in your testimony that the cybersecurity vulnerabilities will expose the United States to risk and to attacks, and that Twitter's security failures threaten the country's national security. Good with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I get hidden ad buyers. We saw the same thing with Facebook when they were taking ads with the payments denominated in rubles and not bothering to figure out that there might have been Russians behind those ads. And you've mentioned concerns about hidden Chinese ad buyers. But if we could talk a little bit more about the national security risk associated with, for instance, the unregistered Saudi foreign agent who worked at Twitter, or the pressure to hire Indian government agents. Walk us through a scenario of how an individual planted in Twitter like that could create a national security risk for the United States. And if you would, make particular reference to the fact that, at least when I use Twitter, I'm sending stuff out. It's intended to be public. So how, in that environment, can a foreign agent create national security risk of any significant nature?
Yes, sir. There are several aspects to that. There's the non-public information that we've spoken about earlier today, your location, your phone number, your email address, things that aren't advertised to the world. In fact, I believe 200 million, if we want to say regular users, not necessarily from a national security standpoint. Twitter in 2020 internally assessed that they lost information on 200 million users for email addresses, phone numbers, other information like that. This is the information that you need in order to start taking over other people's accounts. With your phone number and an email address, I can hijack your phone number. I can then change your Gmail, your Coinbase, your Ameritrade, your other accounts. I can cause financial harm that way. I can then assume your identity. But more importantly, I probably want to be able to understand your whereabouts, your network, and understand, well, I'll give you an example in foreign governments, a concern, and then we can apply that to the United States. There were requests for information about members in the farmers protest. There might be organizations or groups in the United States where, once I know your home address and your home phone number, I can approach you in real life. I can put pressure on you. I could possibly recruit you. You could be a witting or unwitting accomplice, and then I could influence you or target you for influence operations in the real world.
Let me just offer the thought that my home address and phone number and email address are pretty widely known, and indeed in the public domain. So how does Twitter access to that information? Is there more, or what's the difference between being able to look me up in the phone book and having Twitter access to that information?
Having been in the public sector myself, yes, a lot of my information became known. There's also a lot of people who are in particular roles where that information is not known. And the targeting of them, perhaps staffers, perhaps aides, perhaps people around you influencing to build that network, which we have seen within, not Twitter, but which the U.S. and the intelligence communities have seen as part of the great game in the intelligence communities and world.
Okay, so just play that out for me a little bit more, given that so much of this information is available through other channels. What would the end game be for, let's say, a foreign government seeking to put that kind of pressure on somebody who could presumably make a difference or a decision about to the benefit of the foreign country?
Perhaps identifying a relative, a family member, a colleague who is in financial issues or has other elements that can be leveraged against them to help them influence you in a particular fashion without your awareness.
So you're able to, somebody would be able to create a sort of family or personal network around an individual Twitter user and extract information about folks in that network?
That is one particular aspect that intelligence communities are meant to do.
How would that take place? Through if somebody's gotten into the Twitter system, how do they find that out?
Well, it might be used in combination with other data collection sources. For instance, one of the concerns of U.S. People traveling to other countries was there information in the OPM database? And can that information be cross-indexed against the healthcare industry databases that have been lost? Do we know that this person has a particular political bias on Twitter, and start to tie all of these things together for people of influence or access within governments or within sensitive positions?
Thanks very much. My time is up.
Thank